So one of the first implications from research question 1, this is what I concluded. Unless there were also protective buffering factors, such as feeling attractive or confident in some way, or positive childhood messages from parents about fat, the avoidance of dating and sexual intercourse did not seem to be made by choice, but rather a sense of forced passivity. So most participants believed that they would behave less inhibited sexually at a lower weight for both physical and psychological reasons. So this is really the implication that there may be, with some of our clients, there may be, not for sure, but there may be this cultural imperative that they have felt from the messaging that they've received, that they need to hide. They need to be invisible. They need to be outside of the dating or the sexual world. And that they do that out of a sense of feeling rejected from this majority culture. So it's really another kind of expression of marginalization that can happen around patriarchal and misogynistic values that are really embedded in all of our institutions, but even more so embedded in like marketing, the dieting culture, and really the multi-billion-dollar industry that is fat phobia. Taking the interview and the survey data together, it was also important for me to note that despite the focus on sexual problems associated with weight in the interviews, participants also had more overall agreement than disagreement with body appreciation statements. So my conclusion there was that it should not be assumed that the impact of weight on sexuality is negative. That's something that when we're working with clients, we do not want to assume that based on what they're talking about or their presentation or their body shape or anything like that means that their sexuality has been negatively impacted. It may be positively impacted. There are a lot of ways that can happen. Yeah, I could talk about a lot of those, but we'll have to move on. So for research question 2, around participants perceiving a lack of positive representation of fat women and only slow changes towards body positivity. It concluded that society's lack of positive representations and limited change is telling women and men, but more so women, fat women, that they are not attractive and that they should be invisible in society. So similar to research question 1's implications and conclusion, that that's the message that a lot of fat women are receiving, is because I'm not represented, I'm not wanted, I need to hide, I maybe need to avoid dating or sexuality or anything that gets close to that because of the fear of society's rejection. We're going to talk about how that relates to like secure attachment, because I think that is really important. This conclusion is also very consistent with objectification theory that suggests that participants felt the impacts of the objectification of females in society, and in this society that held preferences for those who fit into the thin ideal. And again, the survey is a reminder that despite the challenges associated with the cultural messages, participants were still able to feel some appreciation of their bodies. So in terms of research question 3 and the differences that participants were expressing, the 3 buffers that I came up with were to be able to feel attractive is a buffer, to feel confident is a buffer to the cultural messages, and positive messages from parents can all be buffers to help compensate for what the harmful messages are that people are exposed to without even trying, without our full consent, being exposed to these messages and images. So in terms of the attractiveness, some of the participants were talking about feeling sexy, wanting to wear lingerie, foreplay as parts of heightening the sexual experience, but that those all needed to be done from a place of feeling attractive from within, not based on what other people were saying, because it was not always correlated that a supportive partner then meant any differences in the sexual experiences that women were having. It was more about what they were internalizing within themselves about how they thought of themselves, and not necessarily what a partner's impact was. Although there were some situations where the partner's impact did appear to have some power and impact. So I'm also thinking that some of these conclusions fit within some of the body appreciation literature and research as that being a potential buffer to the negative cultural impacts of a preference for thinness. So being able to appreciate one's body might be quite linked with feelings of attractiveness and confidence. Like they're similar kind of in vein about being able to get to a place where there's an approach dynamic instead of an avoid or a withdraw kind of dynamic there. The positive childhood messages about obesity from parents seem to have such a big impact that was much bigger than the cultural messages and the messages from partners. It seemed that there was a particular area of importance attached to how parents thought about fat and fat phobia when I was listening to these lived experiences. Some of the factors around this interpretation as well that need to be discussed. This was just before COVID-19 when I did these interviews and completed this dissertation. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I do know that COVID touches everything, everything it can. And so I would suspect that also because of some of the stuff that Angela shared, where there's been quite an emphasis on like the quarantine 15, or like the just people gaining weight in isolation, which seems to have continued to propagate fat phobia and shaming people into trying to conform again towards a thin ideal. So this data was collected before COVID-19. The other part, or actually maybe everybody already had it. I'm just kidding. It was before COVID-19. And the other issue here is the transferability. Because this is taken from a single city in Western Canada, I do not know exactly how this sample translates, even across Canada or the States. And so I think that those are important things to think about, because if I'm doing this same study now, in a different location, I'm probably going to add a question about COVID. How did that impact things as well? Or is this seen as maybe a marker or a signpost of something? Because we're just beginning to learn some of the psychological ramifications of COVID-19.